Hi, all. Welcome back to my shop. I was looking over some of my turning stuff, and I was admiring this box, and I thought, I kind of like the shape and decoration of that. And and then I was trying to decide what I was going to turn today, and I ran into this little rough turned piece of cherry, and I thought, well, let's make something a little bigger. Maybe make it a candy bowl. So this is made out of 1 3/4 inch cherry. Actually, it's 8/4. You can pick up dried cherry like this most any lumber yard. I had roughed it out before. I think I was going to use it as part of a wig stand, but it got set aside and never used. So I'm going to pick up where I left off on this. I need to clean up the edge. And then I looked around for some kind of compatible wood for the top, and I found this piece of cabinet wood. I think it may be glued up of a couple of pieces. It had lacquer on it, so it's kind of hard to tell. And it's not going to stick up as high as the other one, but it's readily available, and I think it'll work. I think the white will look contrast well with the cherry. So then I had to go out and find something to make the handle out of, and I found this reddish block, which I think will look nice with this cherry and match against the white. So let's get started. So first thing I'm going to do is mount this on the chuck using the recess I'd turned previously.
I'm using my homemade shear scraper to clean up the bottom of the recess that I already had on this rough turn bowl. And this is one of those Richard Raffin style with a little notch on it, so I'm able to do a little detailing at the bottom. Made it a little easier to finish up the box at the end. So I'm putting a little notch in there. And then refining the edge a little bit. I'm coming in there and making a little V-groove with a point tool. Point tool's a handy tool, 1/4 inch rod. So now I'm taking my shear scraper and cleaning up the outside of the bowl. You see I'm getting nice fluffy shavings. Turn it up 45 degrees, get a little smoother shavings, just mostly getting rid of tool marks and refining the shape a little bit. This is a shape I'm going for. This is a cross-grain box of Black's Limba. I like the shape, so I thought I'd just take this bowl and make one look a lot like it. Kind of marking where I'm going to do some texturing on the outside, decorated. I'm going to put a bead on around each of those marks, and then I'm going to put a texture band in the middle. So first I've got to cut up to the line to make room for the texturing. And I'm going to leave the 2 beads proud. I'm using, I think, a 3/8 inch bowl gouge for this. Using a spear scraper. I don't use that a whole lot very often. I'm rounding over and cleaning up that top edge just so I'll know exactly where to put that bead. I'll come back and finish that edge later, but I need to know where to put that bead now. So I'm using a spindle gouge. Cutting away from the bottom of that bead, cutting up into it so it'll be proud. When you texture, you need to sand to the your final sanding. In most cases, it's 320 to 400. But you got to have a good surface to work on for that texturing. So I'm going to use a Sorby micro spiraling system with the texturing wheel. A nice clean surface ready to go. Texturing, this texturing wheel makes it really easy to apply a little decorating band. First you go directly onto it and then experiment a little bit as you turn the angle. The more you turn that angle off of 90 degrees, the more aggressive it gets, and it's going to start tearing out. But the beauty of this kind of texturing is because it does expose a lot of end grain. When you put finish on it, it darkens that band and really helps it pop. Some of y'all may comment on the ring I'm wearing. I went out and bought some silicone rings to wear in the shop in case I forget to put my wedding ring back on. Did a little sanding. You can see the bottom where I cut a bead at the base and did a little decoration inside. Now let's take it off and reverse it. Already had the recesses on here. Like I said, I think I had this set aside to make a wig stand, and did a couple of other wig stands. So now I'm rounding over that edge. Now I've got to do a recess for the lid to fit into. Because this is a cross-grain box, essentially a bowl turned into a box, you're going to have more wood movement than you would with a typical box. It's a cylinder, so you got to have a loose-fitting lid. So first thing I do is remove some of the wood. Whoops, got to tighten the tailstock down. I have a banjo rather. So I'm going to remove a little bit of wood here. Just using bowl gouge. Put a little light here so I can see. Come a little further inside, go a little bit deeper. Trying to undercut it a little bit. Want to get underneath that rim, otherwise it'd be kind of a clunky box. Now I'm going straight in to relieve that wood I've got in the middle. Sometimes that's the easiest way to do it. Using a 1/2 inch bowl gouge here. Checking the depth. I don't use recesses very often, so I've got to be real careful. Recognizing that the bottom of the bowl is closer to the bottom of that recess than I might realize, so I've got to pay attention to that. Come back in here with a little larger gouge and get underneath it. Get underneath that rim. Ultimately, I'm going to have to resort to some type of scraper to get under there. Now I'm using a box scraper to make that recess for the lid. Go straight in. Now I'm going to use a hook tool to really get underneath that rim, so the box rim's not too thick or too clunky. Got a little rare earth magnet on it, so I can use that to evaluate how deep I go sometimes. Leave it attached. Okay, now I'm using a large negative rake scraper to kind of clean up some of the tool marks. I switched to a smaller negative rake scraper to make it easier to get into the corner. It's just too difficult to make that curve with that great big one. And I caliper it, especially down near the bottom. Make sure I'm not going to make the inside bigger than the outside. And feels pretty good. Got a little further to go. And I start my sanding process. I use my DIY abrasive paste on the inside of vessels that I'm not normally going to buff the inside, either too small or not worth the effort. Basically, the abrasive paste is going to accomplish the same thing as buffing, or buffing would accomplish the same thing as abrasive paste. Now I'm going to put on a glue block mounted on a faceplate, and I'm going to use this to mount the top. So I clean off the surface because I've used it before. Now I use double-sided Turner's tape. I get this from Woodcraft. This is really strong stuff, and I've had it for about 17 years. Keep it in a plastic bag. It hasn't dried out yet. 2 strips is plenty. Take a pocket knife to kind of take off the cover. This is not your average double stick tape. This is a cloth back tape. It's really thick. So I take the block, came from an old cabinet marking centers, and I've got to take that lacquer off. So I mark the center with an awl, make it a little easier to get it centered with the cone center. Got to change to a larger tool rest. I use the bowl gouge to take it round. Now I'm marking a tenon. This is going to be the top of the box. So I'm making a tenon so I can use the tenon to hold it to clean the underside of the lid. Nice fluffy shavings. So I measure the box lid, and I'm kind of gauging the size. I've got to take it down a little bit more, obviously. But now that I got the tenon, I've got to pry it off slowly, pulling it away from the tape. Just continuous pressure. There we go. Take off my glue block and put on a chuck. Mount the blank using that tenon I just turned. And getting a feel for the size and actually marking it. Remember, the one on the left touches, one on the right does not. Okay, got it about the right size. Now I'm checking it against the lid. Now I'm cutting that rim on the inside of the lid. Taking my chuck gauges to set the actual recess I'm going to make here. I'm coming in there with a skew to kind of clean up that that recess that make it a bit more dovetail. Coming in there with the bowl gouge to hollow it out just a little bit. And coming in there with the scraper to kind of clean up the bottom a little bit. Conventional scraper, so the handle's got to be raised up a little bit. And now I do a little sanding.
All right, my camera froze up and I lost some, but we in that last scene we
Right.
finished the underside.
Looks like
We
it's fitting well.
used the recess, put it back on the chuck, and
So I'm using that
it's
recess.
fitting well in the box. I put a little bead on the outside, and I want to shape the middle here.
I'm going to clean up
With the knob.
that lacquer.
All right, first thing I'm going to do is go ahead and drill this hole.
So now I'm going to use a drill bit. I think I'm using a 5/8 of an inch to drill a stopped hole. I'll use epoxy to hold the knob, so it should be strong enough. It's going to be a loose fit, so it's not going to be a lot of tension on it. But slow the speed down to about 500 or so while you're drilling, and always keep your hand on the tailstock for safety. So when you're backing it out, you know if it's getting stuck. Just a good habit to get into. Know a fellow got about 7 stitches in the arm when he didn't do that. Now we're finally getting rid of that lacquer. And now I'm shaping that tenon to let it flow into the top of the rest of the lid, and doing a little sanding. Now I'm using a D-way beading tool. Just put a little bead right there where those two different surfaces meet. It's a great little tool for making smaller beads. Bigger beads, just as easy to use a spindle gouge. And now I'm using my spindle gouge to take the surface down a little bit on the insides so that bead will stand proud. Now it's time to turn the knob. I'm using my collet chuck. I did a review on this a while back.
I've got a 3/4 inch.
It's a Prentice collet chuck from Craft Supply.
Texturing on it.
I'm using some kind of exotic wood. I don't scrap that I had. It's reddish. I'm not sure what it was. And use my spindle gouge to shape it. I think I lost some footage on making this, but I've got a little textured rim around the edge of that. And I'd already checked the size, the 5/8 to make sure it fit the hole, and that's where I'm using the collet chuck hold. Now I'm going to again use some of that DIY abrasive paste. 4 parts mineral oil, 1 part beeswax, and 1 part diatomaceous earth. And it really polishes it up nice. So there's the final bowl. Now I got lucky. I'm using a 5-inch jaws, and this will just fit over it snug enough for me to clean up that recess, so it won't look so pronounced. I'm just going to flow the bottom into the bottom, kind of get rid of that deep recess. Use a detail gouge to put a little detail ring around the edge. Some sanding. Here's a few views. The final product is the bottom of the inside lid. There's the top of the lid with a little knob and textured rim. There's the bottom of the bowl, little detail. And there's the total view. And here's another one I made. I used little Zentangle porography on this one. Y'all stay safe. Come on back, you hear? And if you're interested, I give lessons in my shop. Details on my website.